So first of all, good morning or good afternoon, depending where you are. But most of all, a big welcome from the Long Run team. It is a real pleasure, to be honest, to have so many of you joining us this year. And I'm delighted to see many of our members, but also our partners and those that are engaging with our work more broadly. This is now the third iteration of the Virtual Impact Show. And we've started this, we had a very simple intention. We wanted to create a space for sharing the work that is happening in our community and connect that work to the broader industry discussions. What we are aiming to do now is to really build on that. Not just to showcase activity, but to contribute to a more grounded and a credible understanding of what impact actually looks like in practice and where it is working, but also where progress still needs to be made. I'd like to start with a reflection of where we are, not just as an organization, but also as the industry. Over the past few years, there's been a noticeable shift in how nature is being understood. Biodiversity is no longer being treated as a CSR topic alone. It is increasingly recognized as a material business issue because business resilience, whether we are talking about tourism or any other sector, depends on nature. And every business, in one way or another, both depend on nature and impact it. That changes the conversation quite fundamentally. At a global level, this shift is really beginning to be reflected in policy and frameworks. Through the Global Biodiversity Framework, initiatives such as the TF, businesses are being asked to better understand and disclose their dependency and impact on nature. The intention behind this is very clear: to bring greater transparency, to enable better decision-making, and ultimately to shift how business operates. But the reality at this stage is still quite complex. There are multiple frameworks, there are overlapping approaches, and often an unclear starting point, particularly for businesses operating on the ground. At the same time, data remains inconsistent and efforts are often siloed. So while there is a real momentum, we are not yet seeing the level of impact that is needed to really shift the needle. And this is the gap that we are collectively working to close. It is becoming increasingly clear as well that what to do is necessary needs not no more frameworks. We have enough of those, but we need greater coherence. We need to start treating climate, biodiversity, and nature and land as part of one system, because this is how nature functions. We need to align efforts across sectors as well, not only within environmental departments, but across finance, operation, governance, and all the other departments. And importantly, we need to focus on implementation, on what is actually happening or not at the business level, as well as the landscape or the seascape level, because this is really where impact becomes real. And this is particularly where tourism has a really important role to play. Tourism does not sit outside the system, it operates within them, in very real places. It brings together ecosystems, communities, and economies in a way that few other industries do, which means it carries both responsibility but also a huge opportunity. In many ways, it is now being discussed that at the global level is also what this community within the long run has been working towards for some time. And through the 4Cs of conservation, community, culture, and commerce, the long run has always taken a more integrated view, not treating these areas as separate priorities, but interconnected elements of a system that needs to function and needs to balance together. Across our community, which is now protecting over 23 million acres of nature and supporting hundreds of thousands of people, this work is happening in very different contexts and very different business models across the globe, from large, complex landscapes to smaller community-led initiatives. It isn't perfect, but it is practical, and it is grounded in real operational discussions and decisions. So if you take a broader context serious, then the idea of accelerating impact also needs to be understood differently. It is not about doing more, being more and doing more things actively or quickly. It is about improving the effectiveness of what we are already doing. It is about reducing fragmentation. It is about improving the decisions and how they are made. It's using data more meaningfully and ensuring that finance reaches the right places, and creating conditions for what works to be replicated. We are starting to see some of these building blocks already. We have better data infrastructure, greater alignment and disclosure, and a growing recognition that collaboration is necessary. But there is still work to do, particularly in making this more accessible and more coherent for businesses operating on the ground. Over the course of today's session, what you will see are examples of this in practice. You will hear from those managing conservation efforts under increasing pressure, and what it takes to sustain that effort and that work over time. You will hear from communities who are not just participating in tourism, but are shaping it. And you will see how businesses are adapting their models, moving towards more regenerative approaches. And you will hear how data and technologies are beginning to support better decision-making when it is used appropriately. These are not abstract ideas, they are operational realities, and they often involve difficult trade-offs, which are not always visible from the outside. As this work becomes more visible, there's also growing expectation around how it is communicated. There's less tolerance for vague and unsubstantiated claims, a greater need for clarity, transparency, but also evidence. And the good work that is not communicated clearly can easily be overlooked. But equally, communication that is not grounded in reality carries its own risk. So part of the work ahead is not only what we do, but how we communicate it responsibly and accurately. I would encourage you, as you move through the sessions today, to listen not to what is being done, but how it is done, and particularly why. And to look for the detail and to understand the context and to consider what this means for your own work. If we are serious about contributing to a more coherent global nature agenda, then the question is not whether we are doing something. It is whether we are doing it in a way that is aligned, it is credible, and it is capable of scaling. And that is something for all of us to reflect on. So thank you so much for joining the Long Run third Virtual Impact Show, and I hope you find the sessions ahead both useful and thought-provoking.